How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. I did this last year. This is going to be my 2026 bracket prediction. Last year's bracket, if you watched the video, was pretty terrible. However, I did at least correctly pick the national champion, which was the Florida Gators. Any semblance of success would be great. However, I'm not really counting on it. We'll go ahead and get started with Duke and Siena. I'm not going to think too terribly much about that. Duke will be something to watch later on as we get deeper into this tournament, whether or not Patrick Gongba is actually going to be healthy, as he was held out during the ACC tournament, and then Caleb Foster most likely is not going to return, which Caden Boozer has done a great job filling in as a starting point guard. He's actually stepped up big time. Seems like a guy who's just been waiting for his turn. I don't think that Duke's going to have any problem with Siena. Ohio State and TCU is going to be one of the most fun 8-9 matchups we've watched, and I'm honestly just kind of disappointed that these teams wound up playing each other, because these are two teams that I think could have made runs if they landed at different spots. Overall, Bruce Thornton, I'm going to go Bruce Thornton in Ohio State. Him and John Mobley are just an excellent scoring backcourt. Bruce Thornton just became the Ohio State's all-time leading scorer, which is super cool. So they're going to have a date with Duke. However, I wouldn't be shocked if TCU and David Punch pulled this out. TCU's beat some really big teams this year. That one's going to be a really fun game to watch. St. John's in Northern Iowa. Ben Jacobson has a great squad, defensively especially, at Northern Iowa. But I just do not see Rick Pitino and the Johnnies, the Big East champions, losing in the first round. Going to move on. Kansas and Cal Baptist. I've kind of actually gone back and forth with this one. Cal Baptist has a really awesome dynamo score, and Dominique Daniels Jr. He's averaging 23 points a game. Absolute stud. I'm interested to see how Kansas does with their chemistry. Does Darren Peterson actually want to be there? Is Darren Peterson going to try and make it all about him and try to be the dynamo? Not that he isn't capable, but what does that do for their chemistry? I think that this could be a sneaky upset pick, but I can't really bet against Bill Self and Kansas in the very first round. Louisville and South Florida, we really just don't know if Michael Brown Jr. is going to be healthy, or even if he is healthy, if he's going to play up to his potential. We saw whenever he returned from injury earlier in the season that it took him a little bit to get hot. I really like South Florida. I really like Isaiah Nelson, who is the Conference USA Player of the Year. Wes Enos can absolutely shoot the ball, and I'm going to go with South Florida. This feels like the inevitable upset that everybody's picking, and I'm going to further that. This seems similar to the Murray State over Marquette, the 12 over 5, when John Morant was a sophomore at Murray State. Just kind of, it's going to happen. Might as well stick with it. Michigan State, North Dakota State. Sparty on. I don't think that Tom Izzo's losing first round this year, especially not with veteran guard play like Jeremiah Fears, assuming that he doesn't do something really stupid like try to intentionally hurt somebody. UCLA and UCF. Look, UCF has had some really good wins this year. I think an issue that I have is, their leading player is Riley Kugel, who's bounced around the SEC, former Florida guy, former Mississippi State guy. I think they kind of go as he goes, and I think that he can get into a slump, and if he can't come out of it, I don't know. I trust that UCLA, while they're banged up, Donovan Dent and Tyler Bilodeau, we don't really know what the rest of the tournament's going to look like for them, but I have enough faith in UCLA and Mick Cronin to get it done here. UConn Furman, Alex Wilkins is a baller for Furman. He's an absolute bucket getter, but I'm gonna take Dan Hurley and UConn and this team of guys who have won national championships before to move past Furman pretty easily in the first round. Back up here to Duke, Ohio State. This is one that I've actually gone back and forth on too. Duke has been playing with fire for the past, the entire ACC tournament. Close, close call wins. Teams are coming to give them the absolute best they got, and I think that Ohio State could actually make a real push. I think the big problem is Ohio State does not have the bodies to put on Cam Boozer. And I think that Duke is going to make it work. I also think that Shire has done a great job of adjusting with the injuries, and I think Duke is just going to have a little bit too much. St. John's and Kansas. This is where I have Kansas faltering. I think St. John's is going to continue with their Big East streak. They have played lights out through the Big East tournament, and I think that momentum is going to continue and set up a really good matchup between them and Duke. South Florida, Michigan State. As much as I love USF and all the weapons that they have, I just don't think it's going to be enough to take down this veteran-led Michigan State team. And then UCLA, UConn, I'm going to have to take the experience, mostly because even though UConn kind of sputtered towards the end of the Big East regular season and in the tournament, I don't know how healthy Donovan Dent and Tyler Bilodeau for UCLA are going to be. They've turned it on the last little bit, but I think health is going to play a huge factor in this. I know that this kind of looks chalky with the 1-5 and the 3-2 in this region, but I think this is just how it's going to play out. I feel like at the top we have vulnerability, and at the bottom we don't have teams good enough to make a real bang. And so it's just going to be kind of muddled up in the middle. So I actually, between Duke and St. John's, this is going to be a really good game, and I think it's going to test both teams very well. And we've got a great coaching matchup between Shire and Rick Pitino. Overall, I am going to have Duke getting by. Cam Boozer just seems to find a way. Duke seems to find a way. They make adjustments. They are a better three-point shooting team than the Johnnies. I think that they have the depth to keep up with them and the guard play to be able to handle it. And so I think Zuby Ejiofor and Cam Boozer is going to be a really fun battle down low. If Pat Gongba is back, then I think that just adds an extra layer of difficulty for St. John's to get past Duke. So let me have Duke moving on. And then Michigan State, UConn. This is where I think that Dan Hurley's trip stops. I think I have a lot of faith in this Michigan State team. I think Jeremy Fears is one of the best point guards in the country. They are composed. They're not the greatest team out there, but I just have some faith in them. I don't necessarily have faith in Dan Hurley to not get ejected at some point. And I don't see UConn making it past this the way that they kind of sputtered towards the end of the season, which sets up a Duke-Michigan State rematch. Duke went to Michigan State earlier this year, had a really awesome game, and edged out Michigan State there at the very end. And I have to imagine that Duke is going to continue that. I don't think that Michigan State has the offensive firepower, and I also think that by this point in time in the tournament that the adjustments by Shire will be made, that the team will be used to playing with each other without Caleb Foster, and I think that the chemistry is going to continue. So I'm going to have Duke advancing to my Final Four from this from this region, from this East region. Now I'm going to move over to the West region. We have Arizona and Long Island. Fins up is really cool. I love how that's taken off, but I'm going to keep it simple and go with Arizona. Villanova, Utah State. Villanova is another team that just kind of sputtered towards the end of the year. Utah State is incredibly motivated. They feel slighted because they got a 9 seed despite winning their conference tournament. They played a decently tough schedule. I'm going to have Utah State, who's hot, take over the sputtering Nova Wildcats. Wisconsin High Point. I'm so frustrated that this is the matchup that we got for 512 because I was really high on High Point, especially Chase Johnston. He just reminds me of the next Jack Golke with the fact that he only shoots three-pointers and he's making them at an insanely high clip. Granted, he's not scoring in high volumes like Golke was, but you just see the blueprint. High Point likes to score, but Wisconsin can score and keep up. Nick Boyd and John Blackwell are just that's an incredible backcourt, and now they're getting back Nolan Winter in the front court. I think that Wisconsin is just going to be a little too much for High Point, and then same with Arkansas and Hawaii. I know Arkansas has kind of been playing with fire a little bit down the stretch, but I just can't go against Darius Acuff. He might be my favorite player in college basketball right now. The way that he is so dedicated, he leaves it all on the floor. He just gets absolutely after it every single game, and I'm gonna take Arkansas there. BYU and Texas versus NC State. Texas and NC State are just bottom of the barrel bubble teams. I really like Dalen Swain for Texas and Jordan Pope and that group of guys and Voikatitis. I think that Texas will probably win that matchup. But once they get here, I think that AJ Devonsta, I think that this is going to be his tournament. I think that he is just going to absolutely explode. I think he's motivated to prove why he should be the number one pick and that how he can carry a team even despite losing Richie Saunders earlier in the year and them sort of sputtering. I think he's trying to figure it out. Gonzaga, Kennesaw State. Um, I don't think that there's much to talk about here. I actually really like Kennesaw State in their 3-point shooting, but this is a de facto home game for Gonzaga being in Portland. So I'm going to keep it with Kennesaw State. Miami, Missouri. I like both of these teams, but ultimately I'm going to go with the best player on the floor, which in my opinion is Missouri. I think Mark Mitchell is just starting to find his rhythm. He is really on a tear. And I think that he is going to take the Tigers past the Canes. And then Purdue and Queens. Really cool to see Charlotte team. That's where I'm at in Queens make the NCAA tournament, winning their conference tournament in one of their first years of eligibility, which is awesome to see. However, I don't think that they're going to have enough to get past Purdue. I'm not a Purdue believer. However, I have enough faith in Purdue to not blow that game. Moving up to Arizona, Utah State. This is Utah State can feel as slighted as they want to. They don't have what it takes to take on Arizona. And then Wisconsin, Arkansas. This is going to be a super fun backcourt battle. Arkansas is coming off winning the SEC, and again, I cannot go against Darius Acuff. I know that Nick Boyd has Final Four experience for Wisconsin. John Blackwell is a dynamo, but I cannot go against Darius Acuff right now the way that he is playing. And Trevin Brazile, I think I think that Trevin Brazile being the senior front court member, I think he's going to have some out of his mind games. BYU Gonzaga, I'm just not high on Gonzaga. I'm really not high on either of these teams, if I can be perfectly honest. However, I believe that I am going to stick with the A.J. DeBonsta game. I think that he is going to have enough to overpower them, especially if Gonzaga does not have Braden Huff. Who knows if that guy's actually coming back? He's been out for some time. He makes a big difference. Maybe my mind would change if we knew that Braden Huff was going to be healthy, full strength, ready to go. But as of right now, that's not the case, and I'm just going to go with the best player on the floor to make things happen, which is BYU. Missouri and Purdue. Look, Braden Smith is going to, in the Queens game, most likely break the NCAA's all-time assist record, which is incredible. It's been held by Bobby Hurley for over 30 years, and that's amazing. That's about as good as it's going to get. Matt Painter does not have a 7'5" Zach Edey to dump the ball into and take him all the way to the national championship game anymore, despite his coaching. Matt Painter has shown time and time again that he can't coach his way out of a wet paper bag, and I think that Missouri is going to have a hard time with Mark Mitchell, with Missouri's size as a whole. And so I am going to take the Tigers to pull off the 10-2 upset and move on to a game with BYU. Arizona, Arkansas. Arizona has made it to the Sweet 16, and that's as far as they have gone with Tommy Lloyd. Arizona has been an absolute dynamo this season. However, Arizona has not made a Final Four since 2001, hasn't won a national championship since 1997. They're actually the last West Coast team to win a national championship. That was almost 30 years ago. I think that trend is going to continue. Time and time again, I put my faith in them, and time again, they let me down. And I think that Darius Acuff, I think that John Calipari is going to have the coaching edge in this game. I think that the talent matchup is, while it favors Arizona, I think that Calipari is going to be able to manifest enough, and I think that Darius Acuff is just going to have an absolute game, and he is going to take down Arizona. And then here, moving to this game right here, where we have BYU and Missouri. I think that AJ DeBonsa and the Cougars fight on. I think that this is where Missouri's season ends. Um, Again, I'm high on AJ DeBonsta. Maybe it's fool's gold, and maybe I just really am over obsessed with him. But I am just I love what he brings. I love his attitude. I love his work ethic, and I love his competitiveness. And I think that the matchups that he is going to have throughout this tournament could favor him if he can just make sure that he makes it happen. Then Arkansas BYU, I cannot go against Darius Acuff. I think that this is where the BYU magic ends. I think this is where BYU just doesn't have enough to get past a well-coached Arkansas team with Calipari. And so I have Arkansas moving on to my Final Four out of the West. I'm going to move on to the South over here with Florida and Prairie View or Lehigh. I'm not going to think too much about that. Go Gators. Clemson, Iowa. I think that this has a potential to be a relatively boring matchup. I'm not super keen on locking in on this game, but I do think that Bennett Sturts is going to have enough to get another win in the month of March. Vanderbilt, McNeese. Vanderbilt really just got absolutely disrespected with their 5 seed. I thought that they deserved at minimum a 4 seed, and I hate the pull that they got because McNeese State is incredibly tough, but Vanderbilt, though they sputtered at the end of the SEC championship game, they did just take down the reigning national champions in Florida. I think that Tyler Tanner and Duke Miles is going to be enough, and those bigs. If Tyler Nickel can stay hot too, I just don't think that Vanderbilt's going to have any trouble with McNeese. Nebraska and Troy. Nebraska has never won an NCAA tournament game, and I think that of all the games that are going to be played, I think that they have the most pressure on them. Troy can shoot the ball, and Troy is a team that has the DNA with their volume of three-point shooting to be able to make some noise. I considered it, but I honestly think that Nebraska, though they started off 20-0 and then they sputtered at the end, going 6-6. But I think that they're just going to have a little bit too much. I think they're going to be able to step up and actually take a game off of Troy and win. North Carolina, VCU. A lot of people are picking VCU to take down North Carolina since North Carolina no longer has Caleb Wilson. It's a shame that we're not going to get to see him in the NCAA tournament. North Carolina has actually gotten better defensively without Caleb Wilson. Now, offensively, it's been up and down, but defensively, they're actually much better. And this game is also in Greenville, South Carolina. So this is a de facto home game for North Carolina. I know that VCU isn't that much further away, but I actually am not picking that upset. I'm going to have North Carolina take over and get a win there. Illinois, Penn. Penn is another one where I'm frustrated that this is where they landed, especially after TJ Powers' absolute monster performance in the Ivy League championship. We dropped 44 points and Penn's 88. Absolute Looney Tunes performance, and I wish that they had gotten a different draw. But Illinois' offense is so overpowered. They have the number 1 all-time offensive rating according to Ken Palm, and Illinois is going to have their way with Penn. I think they just have too much power. St. Mary's, Texas A&M. Again, Texas A&M started off the SEC really hot. But St. Mary's is taking on a really good Gonzaga team. St. Mary's is taking on Santa Clara, who's also in here. And I think Randy Bennett's going to get another win. I like Buckyball. I like what they do. But I think St. Mary's is going to be able to overall control the tempo. Houston, Idaho. No need to overthink that one. Kelvin Sampson, Kingston Flemings. They're going to make it happen. Florida, Iowa. This is where the Bennett starts magic ends. I don't think I need to think too much about this. Florida is too big, too strong. I know that they just got their tails handed to them against Vandy in the SEC tournament. This could kind of go, two ways. Florida could legitimately be sputtering, and the wheels could be falling off, or they could come back insanely motivated like they did after they lost to Auburn earlier in the season, where they win 12 straight games and almost all of them by 20-plus points. So I have Florida advancing here. I have Florida getting hot, finding their rhythm in the first two games. Vanderbilt, Nebraska. This one is a tough one, too, that I wish were a different matchup, but it's going to be a really, really, really good one. And so I actually have Nebraska moving forward. I think Nebraska is going to be able to step up. I think they're going to be able to take down Vanderbilt, which is going to be a really tough game. But I think Vanderbilt might actually be looking ahead to a potential rubber match with Florida and could possibly overlook Nebraska. I hope that doesn't happen just from a competitive standpoint, but I think that Fred Hoiberg is going to keep the magic going in Lincoln. North Carolina, Illinois, for as good as North Carolina's defense or as improved as North Carolina's defense has been without Caleb Wilson, they still don't have the offensive firepower to keep up with Illinois. I'm not an Illinois believer, but I have no other choice but to believe that Illinois is going to make it past North Carolina, even though, again, it's a de facto home game for the Tar Heels. And then St. Mary's in Houston. I like Randy Bennett as a coach, but I think that Houston's on a mission. I think that they're going to make it back here. And so we are moving to Florida, Nebraska. Again, it's pretty chalky with the 1, 2, 3, 4 so far, but it's hard to see. It's hard to see anything else going this way. Florida, Nebraska. I think this is where the Fred Hoiberg magic stops. Florida is just going to be too big, have too much firepower in the front court. I think they're going to be able to get rink masked in foul trouble early, and that their guards are going to be able to shut down the perimeter shooting and the offensive firepower that Nebraska has. And the Illinois, Houston. Again, I'm not a believer in Illinois. As a whole, I think they're incredibly talented, but I also think that they have the opportunity to absolutely flop in some games, and so now's not the time for flopping. I'm going to take Houston to set up a national championship rematch here in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four. This one will be an absolute game. I think everybody's projecting this to be the case anyway, and it can go either way. It's going to be a fun time. But I ultimately am going to go with the reigning national champions to get past Houston. I think that Florida's bigs are going to be able to get Houston's bigs in foul trouble pretty early, and I trust Florida's guards to focus in on Kingston Flemings and Milos Uzan and make life really, really difficult for them. I think that Houston's definitely going to want to get their get back from the national championship last season, but I think that this is where Florida has even more of an edge this year than they maybe did last year, at least on the interior. And then now moving to the Midwest region, UMBC is not going to do it again. I'm going to have Michigan moving on. However, Michigan's going to be an interesting one to look at going forward, simply because no LJ Kaysen, which is going to be which could play a factor. Georgia St. Louis. This is a frustrating 8-9 matchup because I don't like either of these teams. I could see it going either way. St. Louis kind of sputtered towards the end of the A10 regular season and in the tournament. Yeah, they've got Robbie Avila, who might be the best player on the floor, and Josh Schertz is a much better coach. But I think overall, um, Georgia just has the overall talent and scoring that I just don't know if St. Louis can keep up with. So no Mike White special this year. I think Georgia is going to advance past St. Louis. Texas Tech, Akron. This is another sort of sexy upset pick that a lot of people are picking because Akron can shoot the lights out of the ball. I can certainly see it happening, especially with JT Toppin obviously injured with that ACL tear and being out for the rest of the year. He was an All-American, and that's tough. But I think Christian Anderson is going to make it happen here for the Red Raiders. I think that he's going to be enough to get them past Akron. And then Alabama Hofstra is another interesting one. You have to wonder with Aiden Holloway being arrested at the beginning of this week, that Alabama's second leading scorer, how that's going to affect their team. Is this going to be a team that absolutely locks in, and LeBaron Philon and Latrell Wrightsell and Amari Allen just take over and know that they have to step up even more because now they're missing their second best player? And they have to take over, or are they going to be distracted? Are they going to be distraught? Are they going to absolutely fall apart because one of their leaders decided to be a bonehead? I really like Hofstra. I love what Speedy Claxton is doing up there. I think ultimately, LeBaron Philon knows when to take over games. He knows when to lock in. And I've got Alabama at least moving past Hofstra. Tennessee versus Miami, Ohio, SMU. Look, it really doesn't matter who wins that play-in game. I think SMU is going to win the play-in game because Miami of Ohio is going to actually have to play a real basketball team, albeit not a great one. Whoever comes out of this, Tennessee, as much as I'm not a believer in Tennessee, Tennessee is going to take that one, I think, relatively easily. And then Virginia Wright State. Wright State is a great program, but Virginia, they took Duke down to the wire in the ACC tournament. I think that they are starting to feel themselves a little bit, and I have Virginia moving forward in that one. Kentucky Santa Clara, this is also an interesting one where I see a lot of polarization here. This is the largest difference in NIL expenses in the tournament, and while I'm not a believer in Kentucky to make a huge, big run, I do think that Kentucky is going to have enough to beat Santa Clara. Even though Santa Clara has seen really good teams like St. Mary's and Gonzaga, they're not going to be afraid of their size or athleticism, but I think Kentucky's going to have enough under Mark Pope, especially after going to, I believe, the Elite Eight last year. Iowa State, Tennessee State. Maybe it was a Sweet 16 last year. I don't remember. Iowa State and Tennessee State. I don't trust Iowa State for anything. Again, there's another team that time and time again I have picked them to make big, deep runs, and I don't trust them this year either. I don't dislike them enough to lose to Tennessee State. I hope Nolan Smith could maybe turn it on, but I don't think that one's going to happen. I have Iowa State getting past them. We're moving back up to Michigan, Georgia. Not going to overthink this. Georgia doesn't have what it takes to beat Michigan. And Texas Tech, Alabama. Again, this is where I feel like Alabama might still be disheveled. I think Texas Tech has had enough time without JT Toppin to figure out how to play cohesively. Whereas Alabama, they're still going to have to try and just figure out how to play without Aiden Holloway, and I don't think that's going to be a good look. I think that they're going to have enough to get past Hofstra, but not past Texas Tech. Moving down here, Tennessee, Virginia. Virginia is just too good, too big. I think that they have the size to be able to handle Tennessee's rebounding prowess. But I also think that they have better scorers all the way around. I think they're going to have too much offense. Who knows how well Nate Ament is going to play or if he's even going to be healthy. Kentucky, Iowa State. Again, I don't really care for either of these teams and don't have a ton of belief in them, but I have more belief in Kentucky being able to figure something out than Iowa State actually coming up big in the tournament. So I am going to move Kentucky forward to play Virginia here in the Sweet 16. I am going to move Michigan past Texas Tech. Again, Michigan is also still figuring out how to play without LJ Kaysen, their backup point guard. Elliot Cadeau's going to have his handful with Christian Anderson and Texas Tech. But I'm going to have Michigan moving forward. And then here I have Virginia moving past Kentucky. I don't think that there needs to be much said about that matchup. And then Michigan-Virginia is going to be really interesting. I think Virginia has the size to be able to counteract Michigan's size. And I think that the guard play is going to be incredible as well, all the way around. I think that this might wind up being the game of the tournament if we can make it happen. In the end, though, I think that Michigan is just going to be too talented. I think Yaxel Lindeborg is just going to have a takeover switch here in this game. I think Tisda Ritter for Michigan is going to be a good matchup for him. But at the same time, I think that Yaxel is going to have the edge. And as long as Elliot Cadeau can take care of the ball, I think that Michigan is going to make it to the Final Four. So a little bit of a chalky Final Four here. However, I like a lot of this and how it's going to play out. I'm going to start over here with the Final Four between Duke and Florida. This was a matchup earlier in the year where Florida went to Duke, played a game at Cameron Indoor and lost by 1 on a shot that happened in the last 30 seconds. Duke gave up the lead with under a minute left. And this was when Florida was not playing the way that they had played the rest of the SEC season. This is before they had really figured out how to play together, figured out their rhythm and what worked best. I think that this is where Florida's bigs are going to give Cam Boozer some trouble. Florida has a lot of bigs that they can rotate in, a lot of bodies that they can put on him. And I think that while Ruben Chignolo usually doesn't play tons of minutes despite being the defensive player of the year in the SEC, I think that this is going to be a big minutes game for Ruben Chignolo, and I think he's going to be able to body up Cam Boozer and make life hard enough for him to where Florida pulls it out and makes it back to the national championship game. Arkansas and Michigan. This was a tough one that I went back and forth on too. As much as I love Darius Acuff Jr., I think that this is where Michigan might just have too much firepower and too much size for Arkansas. Again, I think Darius Acuff Jr. is probably the best player on the floor. But I think when it comes down to pure matchups, I don't think that Arkansas matches up very well with Michigan. So I do get a chalky 1-1 Florida-Michigan matchup. Florida versus Michigan in the national championship game would be an absolutely awesome sight to see. Excellent bigs, excellent guards, and this is where I think the loss of LJ Kaysen is really going to hurt Michigan. So long as Florida stays completely healthy, Florida has the bigs to handle Michigan's bigs. Thomas Houck and Yaxel Lindeborg is going to be an awesome matchup at the wing spot. And then I think that, again, the loss of LJ Kaysen is really going to hurt Michigan at the guard spot. I think that Boogie Fland is going to be able to give Elliot Cadeau a ton of trouble. And I see Florida going back-to-back over Michigan, national championships. We'll see if it happens. Thanks for watching. Feel free to let me know how stupid you think I am in the comment section. And, yeah, go Gators, back-to-back. See you at the end of the tournament.